Good afternoon, everybody. So I'd like to welcome you to the Children and Young People's Overview and Scrutiny Panel. We'll just do a little bit of housekeeping. So the fire alarm practice is not expected. If the alarm sounds, can all present leave the building as quickly as possible by way of the nearest exit to the assembly point in the public square outside Cast, beyond the fountain, away from the civic office. No roll call will be undertaken, thank you. If anyone has mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs where the emergency evacuation lift is located and use the intercom situated to the left-hand side of the lift doors to call for assistance. I would like to ask if everyone can ensure that their mobile phone is switched to silent mode, please. This meeting will be audio and visually recorded and will be available to view on the Council's website and YouTube channel. Can I ask if all those present to use their microphones to ensure audio can be captured? Any members of the public entering the Council chamber are accepting that their images will be retained and broadcast by the Council. I'm told that there are no members of the public in attendance today. So I'll go to apologies, and we know that we've got apologies for absence from Councillor Hogarth, Councillor Durant and Antoinette Drinkhill. Are there any other apologies, Caroline?
Not got any more.
Thank you. So to consider the extent to which the public or press are to be excluded from this meeting, there are no issues on the agenda which would require exclusion of the press or public. Declarations of interest. If anyone has a declaration of interest to declare, this would need to be discussed with Caroline Martin, the governance officer behind me, and a form will need to be completed following this meeting. So I'd like to ask members of the panel if they agree the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 5th of September 2024. Are those minutes agreed?
Agreed, yeah.
And seconded? There are no matters arising. Like I say, we've got no public statements. So I think we'll just go to introductions and then maybe if officers want to give a quick overview for questions. So if we can start with Leanne. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Leanne Hornsby. I'm Service Director for Education and Skills at Council.
Hello, I'm Jane Reid, Head of Education and Skills at Doncaster Council.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ryan Johnson. I'm the Senior Employment Manager as part of the Employment Enterprise and part of Business Doncaster as part of Doncaster Council.
Hello, I'm Caroline Brown from Stonehill School. I'm the Work Placement Coordinator.
Hi, I'm Alicia Whitaker. I'm lead for the Local Supported Employment Programme and I work within the Community Autism and Learning Disability team supporting adults into paid employment.
Hi, I'm Sonia Hardwick. I'm one of the careers consultants, part of the Careers Hub, as part of the wider skills team for Doncaster Council.
Hi, I'm Claire Dawson. I am a Send Enterprise Coordinator leading on supported internships in the skills team.
Thank you. So do you want to do a quick overview of the report and then I can just move on from there? Do you want to do that? Yeah, thank you.
Please, thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, I won't take you too much time, because the report, to a large extent, kind of speaks for itself, I think, in terms of the things that we've outlined there, and obviously colleagues will respond to questions that you have. What I wanted to highlight, though, is obviously this is kind of part of that overall Education Skills Strategy 2030, so it forms a part of that. What it shows is the things we've done, the distance we've kind of travelled, but also the things that we have still yet to do. So I think we talked when we looked at the Education Skills Strategy, and we know that we're only halfway kind of through that, and obviously the skills team has only been in place for a couple of years. That's not an excuse. There's a kind of a bit of a sort of reality there, but actually I think between the relevant services, I think one of the things that this highlights is a level of connectivity across the partnership and the importance that's being placed on the work experience and internship and employability agenda. So that would be my introduction. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I would like to give special thanks to Caroline Brown and Alicia Whittaker for coming along today. Could I just ask you to give a quick overview, start with Caroline, on your role and why you're here today? Thank you.
Hello, as I said, I'm Caroline Brown from Stonehill School, which is a school for SEN students. I arrange the work placements for the students for 1 to 2 days a week. I make links with the local employers to provide the work placements to support students with their BTEC courses and also their own personal interests. By the end of the year 14, the aim is to have provided our young people with the skills and knowledge to move on to apprenticeships, further education, internships or employment.
Hi, so I'm Alicia. I work within the CALP team and run the local supported employment programme, which is funded by the DWP. Participants need to be 18 years and over. They must have a diagnosed learning disability, autism or both. They mustn't already be in paid employment or paid self-employment. They can't be in full-time education, but we can work with some in part-time education, depending on how much they're studying. They also can't be on another DWP-funded employment programme. The phase 1 of the programme was initially 30 months. That was from January 2022 to the end of March 25. The first target was to recruit 28 participants by the end of May 2024, which we did. The second target is to get 30% of those participants in sustained employment, which we also managed. The DWP have then extended the programme for an additional 14 months, and we've set ourselves a target of recruiting an additional 20 participants to join the programme by the end of March 2025, and then work with those to hopefully gain 30% of those in sustained employment as well. We run the programme in a cluster with Barnsley and Sheffield. Barnsley lead the programme. We work with the adults to identify skills and work goals, work on CV production, also job applications and mock interviews, employer engagement and arranging reasonable adjustments with employers. And then we can also provide in-work job coaching to hopefully sustain that employment for our participants.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you both for that. And it just shows, you know, mainly here to talk about work experience, probably more the year 11s cohort, which usually do that. But it's interesting to think of how it could, you know, help you in your role when you get them sort of that bit older, but still young people from 18. I'd just like to say the report on the work experience is, I think, so much effort going into that area, and I really do appreciate that. I think we've got a lot to celebrate in Doncaster in this area. I'll just start off with the questions. I've got the first question actually. It's just to clarify. The report does say that there are 32 schools that are eligible for careers and enterprise company. So how many settings are not, or is that all? Have we got all schools involved in that, please?
Hi there, thanks. We currently work with 34 schools now. We've just had 2 new schools join the hub. They are the Ridge Employability College and Harrison College. In terms of eligibility to join the Careers Hub as part of Doncaster Careers Hub, we get told by the Careers and Enterprise Company who's eligible. If there are any other non-eligible schools, in terms of it's all to do with Section 41 status, which I have to say I'm not an expert in, but anybody is welcome to receive our roundups, come to career leader meetings. So there are, we understand there are a further 8 possible schools that may be able to join the Careers Hub. The deaf school being one, because we work with the Communications College, but currently the deaf school is not eligible. We don't make the rules, unfortunately, but we are willing to work with anybody. We are aware there's a number of other schools that we currently don't work with. So hopefully that clarifies the situation.
Thank you. Does what you do work in sync with everyone else? Because with Stonehill trying to get people in, you know, I mean, that's enough. Thank you. That nod was fine. Thanks.
Yeah, if I'll just come in, and maybe Caroline would like to also comment on that. As Stonehill is obviously a part of the Careers Hub, as one of the careers consultants, we'll go out, work with the career leader, other relevant members of staff, try and support them with additional employer contacts. Everyone's after a lot of employer contacts at the moment, as well as all the other things that we do. So we work with the school on the Gatsby benchmarks, which obviously there's a lot of detail about that in the report, broker employer links, and try and work out how we can work together better as a council as well. I think that's something we've done quite well, and there's room for improvement over the next sort of calendar year. I know Ryan sat in front of me, so we've started to forge really good links with him and Business Doncaster, because I think that's a really important aspect of our job that's growing a lot.
Okay, can I ask that on it's paragraph 27, it does mention that 2 settings don't provide any work experience. One of them says due to complex needs, and one is, I'm just wondering if the other one is an academy chain, or is it just one other setting that doesn't provide any opportunity for work experience?
Thank you. Yeah, I think when we've looked at that again, I think that might have been a bit of confusion. I know one of the institutions is Barder School, Douglas Barder School. I had a meeting with them this morning. They do have complex needs. Their main priority next year is experiences of the workplace. So I've provided them with some employer contacts. Conventional work experience for them is quite challenging. I think the other school is also a SEND school. I'm not aware of which one it is, but there's no mainstream academy that are offering 0 work experience. I think the other thing I'd just like to clarify is, say with Barder, and I'm name checking them because I think they're really hard on themselves, because they're having people coming in, they're arranging visits. So I think some of it's a bit of terminology. Sometimes when people say work experience, the schools are thinking if we don't offer a full week, we're not doing a good job. And as Caroline will testify, and a lot of other schools do a huge amount of experiences of the workplace, which sounds like it's just terminology, but actually for students is a lot more useful than perhaps a conventional week. So I would say there's no mainstream academies or mainstream schools that are on 0, if that helps.
I actually spoke to Delta, and they confirmed to me that they don't provide any work experience whatsoever. And the head at one of the schools did say that it's not really, when the report mentions risk assessments and all things that go along with it, which we know can be difficult at times. But he said that they don't feel they've got enough time to get these kids through and get the results that they need. So his suggestion was, it'd be great if they could do work experience after the exams, which I know would probably be hard to get them pulled back in for that. But I just think it's a shame, because that academy chain has got a lot of academies. So like I said, we're not just talking about one setting. They just completely don't engage in it whatsoever.
If I can just, I think it comes back to what I was just saying, Chair, that I know that is Delta's policy, because the Delta schools are in my caseload. My main contact is the career leader. So I would say, I'm not saying they're going against the views of their principals. However, if you look at the experiences that their students get, they go on a lot of trips, they go on a lot of taster days. They might not do that conventional week placement, but they would definitely, I would say they are doing a lot of experiences of the workplace. So some of it is a little bit semantics, if you like, but I do know that is the policy for Delta. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I do know that is the policy.
It's more of a comment and something in my other world. I've done work with Delta as part of work experience where it's done within house and they don't go out, if you like. So there were one thing that I did some time ago, that you did a job interview with the student, you go through it with the student, and I found it was very good. But just for clarity, that's what I found.
Can I go to Councillor Anderson for the next question, please?
Page 24, very encouraging and much improved pictures of compost evaluations 2023-24. Can we attribute this? What can we attribute this to? Could this potentially reduce the number of needs?
Hi. Well, we could do. I guess the first thing I would say is Compass is self-evaluation, so we have to sort of take that into cognizance sometimes. I'm not sure we can relate it to the needs too much, if I'm honest. We work with the career leaders, they work with the people who track and monitor the students. I think, yeah, I'd be worried about drawing much of a cause and effect with on that, if I'm honest. I don't like to say anything I'm not confident with.
Just to kind of add to that, Councillor Cox, because I think when we reflect on actually where we've come from in terms of needs, for example, which is one of the important points, so I think it's one of the contributing factors as opposed to the sole factor. When I reflect on, I think if we were coming back to when we initially reported on NEAT, I guess we would be going back to almost kind of 2 years, 18 months, something like that. I think our NEAT figures for young people with SEN were close to 50%. Actually, they're below 8% now. And actually below 4% for kind of mainstream. So whilst it's really hard to say, is it solely that, I think it's got to be a contributing factor. So when you look at the Compass work, when you look at actually the experiences for young people, when you look at the overall elements of inclusion that have been put together and the wider work that's happening in the skills agenda with Business Doncaster, actually that reduction, I think, is quite significant over that period of time, which means the experiences of young people are getting better. I'd love to be able to come back to a scrutiny and say we're at naught at some point. Don't think that's likely to happen, but that's a kind of an example, really. I think Sonia's right. You can't absolutely nail it to that, but it's really clear that there is that kind of overall contribution between all of those factors.
Can I ask Councillor Anderson to do question 5, please?
Yep, just a short one. What age cohort generally are we talking about undertaking work experience?
I think there's several elements of this, I think. So I'm going to bring a couple of colleagues in. I think when we're talking about mainstream education broadly, you're looking at year 10. It happens in year 10 for mainstream education. I think actually for our young people with SEN, it can be an ongoing thing up to the age of 25, and actually a number of the education institutions as part of that will be part of that journey. And then there's the Business Doncaster. So I'm going to suggest as a sort of, just so you see both sides of those, if Ryan kind of comes in really from a business perspective to talk that through, I think, Caroline, you can talk about experiences from Stonehill, I think, can't you, which is kind of that age banding. And then Alicia, I think you know you bit about supported internships and placements into adulthood. I think there's just a little bit of something you can probably add there. So you can see a bit of a flow on the pathways where I'm kind of coming from, if that's helpful.
Hello. Yeah, so with regards to work experience, we have a number, obviously with Business Doncaster, a number of programmes that work with economically inactive people, unemployed people, and actually people that are employed as well. That might want to, career change or move on in their career or sustain their employment. And one of the elements of this is kind of getting some work experience. So we find work experience is a good stepping stone into getting people into work, especially if they're looking at a career change but don't want to actually commit straight away into changing and getting work experience is a good idea. So we have, like I say, have a number of projects that actually work on this, one of them being UK Shared Prosperity Fund programme we have called Advanced Employment Hub, which offers like bespoke careers advice, guidance, and brokers with businesses on potential work experience placements for them. So it's not just like I say, we said, it's not just one age group. It crosses across a lot of age groups with regards to work experience, and it's a real vital tool and vital element into getting people back into the labour market and also sustaining their employment, especially if they're facing redundancy and elements like that.
Hello. Right, at Stonehill School, the students throughout, actually from year 7 upwards, do have companies come in and speak to them about the different companies. They'll also come in and do activities with them, so they're getting an insight into different businesses and companies, you know, from the age of 11 upwards. And then by year 11, we do organise like 2 full weeks twice a year. It may be within house in school depending on the needs, but then recently we've had some out of like at libraries and one at Yorkshire Bike Shack doing work there. That has also continued, and they're actually doing like 1 day a week now for 9 weeks. Then in year 12, when they come to us in the post 16, they're offered work experience either 1 to 2 days a week. That's in different industries such as like sport, hospitality, IT, maybe performing arts, again to do with their interests or the BTEC qualifications. So they're actually experience the proper world of work and getting the knowledge and skills to be able to help them as they progress. Then by the year 14, when they're about to leave us, at the moment we've got 11 students with us. 10 of them are sort of in internships, so they're out 2 days a week. They also get a travel buddy, so they become independent, because that's a huge thing in the world of work, to be able to get there independently using public transport. So there's actually many of them that are already independent and make their own way there. And then so as it continues, they're obviously getting more and more confidence and independent. So by the time they leave us at the year 14, they could either go into further education, apprenticeships, or employment or internships. Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask you, Caroline, do you feel that it's hard to get companies to engage with taking, you know, specifically people with additional needs into a workplace? Is that an issue at all?
It can be, but we've got some wonderful employers out there, and we do find that the employers who actually engage with us have probably got personal insight into people with SEN, and then they're absolutely fabulous. They've got the time of day and everything to introduce them. However, it's just, I find like face-to-face, going in somewhere, introducing myself and giving them an insight into what we do. We invite them into our school as well. So often we have companies come in to do presentations about the company, the different job roles, and from that, the relationships we make, you know, it's might be baby steps, but they will accept our students for work experience. Also, we've just employed a job coach, which is fantastic. So when she gets in full mode and fully trained up, she'll be there to be able to go out and help the students. And that the employers do really appreciate that, because then they don't feel they're sort of on their own. There is support there from school. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That's interesting, because it, like you said, if they've got their own personal experience, maybe a child themselves with some sort of special educational need, there is still maybe that stigma. If people, it's only because they don't know. They don't, you know, you don't. It's a bit of a way in when they have got that personal experience, like you say, because. And what Alicia does as well, it's realising that these young people have got so much to give. We need these people in the workforce, and often can bring something that somebody that wouldn't have additional needs could bring to the workforce. And I think it's just really encouraging how much work is going on, you could say, behind the scenes, but that's why I wanted to highlight that today as well. I think it's good to get it out there, all the good work that you're all doing, so thank you for that. Yeah.
I mean, my middle son has difficulties, learning difficulties, and it's well documented. But what we've always told him is look at your ability, not your disability. And looking at his ability, there are many, many things that he could do. One of the things that seems to hamper is that we know that the benefit system for some, it's more towards you, Alicia. I know you haven't done your little bit yet, I'm sorry. But it's more towards his benefits are quite, he gets a lot of money. He gets more than I would have, anyway. But with him getting money, it isn't, he doesn't feel it right to go and try and find employment. So with him being obviously over 18, learning difficulties, all these things, he's kind of stuck in a rut because there are things he wants to do and could do, but the financial benefit of it he wouldn't get a benefit from it. So he would be going out and it would potentially cost him money to go. Do you understand where I'm coming from? And I don't know where that can be addressed. Is in some of the stuff I've done previously, I've said, just come and help me then. And he said, I can't, because if somebody sees me, they'll think I'm working. And then they'll grass me up, if you like. So how can all that be addressed for the post-18 kids? I mean, same to you, Ryan. It could be something that could be addressed there, but I just do not know, and neither does he.
Yeah, like I said, we got a number of programmes. Your son would be able to come on one of our programmes, our UK SPF programme. That would be a perfect fit. He would work with a coach, and they would identify those potentials and those gaps and where he could do that, where he isn't being detrimental to his benefits or anything, but he's been it's increasing his confidence in an area or his expertise in an area. So it might not necessarily be a work placement within employment, but it might be something that we've worked with an employer on a project that I could get involved with, because that's another thing that we do. We work with a lot of employers to design projects that can fit with curriculums and other stuff, and obviously with adults and stuff as well. So yeah, it could fit quite well on one of those programs, and I'm happy to talk to you after this about it. So.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation with, we find the same with people who are participating in the scheme, but are obviously signed up to benefits, and then they're in that situation where they're actually thinking, if I work a limited number of hours, I'm going to be in a worse off situation than I am now, not working at all. We can work with people to do better off calculations. Citizens Advice Bureau are the ones who are sort of the experts at that. But I don't think it's something that we've got control of at all. It's a really difficult situation. And unless they work over a certain number of hours, I don't think they will be in a financially better off situation, which is wrong. It doesn't feel right at all, but I don't think that is something we've got control over.
Did you want to add anything more before we move on? Thank you.
I mean, in terms of work experience, the DWP outcome for our programme has got to be paid work. Having said that, similar to yourself, there's a great benefit for many participants in taking part in work experience, and that can be at any age for hours if they're signed up to the programme. It can obviously be that valuable stepping stone to paid work just because they're not in a position where they're going to successfully enter the paid job market. So it can be a short-term work placement just organised for a week or two to get them some experience, or it can be a slightly longer-term thing if that's what they need. Ideally, it's not just a long-term sort of volunteering work experience thing, because that's not what we're about really. But they can obviously gain a lot of transferable skills, improve their social and communication skills, and then hopefully put them in a much stronger position when they actually apply for a paid job. And I'm working with sort of particularly the NHS at the moment, helping people on the scheme apply for sort of work placement positions, volunteering roles with them, like I say, to gain those skills. Supported internships isn't actually myself because they would have to be in a education establishment. But yeah.
Did you want to come in on the internships?
So for the supported internships, one of the biggest barriers with employers that we found is that employers are scared to get it wrong. It's not that they don't want to do it, it's that they don't want to offend anybody or say something that they're not supposed to say. So as part of the work that we've been doing is there's a South Yorkshire collaboration, so I work very closely with Rotherham, Barnsley and Sheffield, and we've created a My Employment Plan that is a document that is the young person's document that they can use that will facilitate that conversation around reasonable adjustment. And this document can be used, has been sent to our HR that we're looking at implemented into our toolkit. And it's starting those conversations. And I think the more that we can get young people into the workplace, the more normal it becomes, and people are used to being around each other and seeing different needs. And even I went out to a large employer and they found that following the supported internship programme, lots of their employees felt brave enough to say, by the way, I've got ADHD, and they would have never have declared it prior to the supported internship programme.
That's great, thank you. It's good to know that it's so fluid as well with what Alicia was saying and how it's based on individual need. It's, you know, everybody's catered for, and like you said, that certain things might work for some and not for others, but it's good that it's not a one size fits all, that they're really getting that individual attention, so that's really good, thank you. And I understand what you're saying as well with the I think we live in a society, don't we, where we're all a little bit sort of scared of saying the wrong thing, which is sad because then the other side of it is people just don't get these opportunities, but thank you. So if we just go back to the report, and I've just got a question on paragraph 29. I'm just wondering if somebody can define for me partially achieving, because we have got 10 schools in that bracket, which obviously it's a third. So just wondering what that actually means. Thank you.
Hello, I can take that one. Basically, that means that schools are making progress, but in order to get your tick 100%, the vast majority of students would have to fulfil that criteria. So if I go back to the Delta example, I know they are supported by programs called Better Learners, Better Workers, which the schools have to pay for. So they will go on a visit with maybe 15 students. So that's not the whole year group. And then they might try and target another program for another 20 students. So they kind of do it that way, rather than some schools do the whole week. Say, I can think of a couple of schools like Hunger Hill, Hayfield, that might have 200, 250 placements they've got to try and find. So they would be able to tick, yes, we're doing it 100%. And some of the other schools do it a bit more piecemeal, just because all sorts of reasons, whether that's capacity, policy. So that's one of the reasons that we've got 10 on sort of partially meeting, if that makes sense. Does that clarify that?
Yeah, that does, thank you. And it's funny you should mention the Better Learners, Better Workers, because I've got their pamphlet here. So we have got some schools in Doncaster that have bought into that, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Delta is one of the examples, and I know they work with quite a few of the other schools in South Yorkshire. So it's a great programme. It's just, it can't cater for sort of everybody, I suppose. So but for the students that do take advantage of it, they have an amazing time. So yeah, it's a really good programme, and I know Sarah Ward a little bit who runs it. So some of the employers she gets are amazing. So it's a model of good practice, and if we could try and replicate it somehow, that might be one of the suggestions we might want to look at for the way forward.
I do know that it's sort of bought in to Sheffield Council, and I have asked, not had an answer yet, but I've asked about that possibly happening in Doncaster, because am I right in thinking that on a really basic level, my understanding of it is, for an example, they might take a group of students into a work setting that might be a big company, but actually show them each individual job that they could do within that company. So right, say like if it's manufacturing, they can have a look at how things are built, but then they can also look at what jobs could be available in like an office environment, or, you know, it's like them sort of being taken, and obviously you don't have to worry about risk assessments because it's, you know, all the surrounding helps there, the safeguarding's there. So I think it could be beneficial for so many more schools and settings to buy into, because it can all be maybe even done in one day. You know, it's not having that commitment of 2 weeks that we used to see years ago. I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah, I think depends on the company I think they go to. Very much I think they do. It's kind of action-packed. They get to showcase as much as they can in those days. I think it's just the schools that have said to me is brilliant, but I'm pretty sure the numbers top out at something like 15, so they can get in a minibus, because again, one of the big barriers for large-scale sort of placements is transport at costs. So again, a lot of schools will feed back to us that is quite a barrier. So again, maybe thinking collectively about that. So yeah, the Better Learner, it is an amazing programme. It's just my concern is always like, well, what about the other 230 kids in the year group? But if those kind of schemes are brilliant, and she works really hard. The kids get a great experience, and it's just maybe working with Sarah to see how we could kind of remodel it and encourage more schools to do it. I agree with you, Chair, definitely.
Thank you for that. So can we go to question 7, which is Councillor Cox?
Paragraph 32. Start is not well used by schools or adults and adult providers. What is being done to promote this platform as the go-to access for the labour market and local opportunities? But I'd like to go a bit. There's lovely things that, and you're all doing an absolutely brilliant job. And I know we've come a long way, Leanne, and thank you. I'm much more accepting of what's going off now than obviously I was. But how are you all promoting what you're doing? You know, I mean, we can look at one thing, but then we're earning lovely things that Caroline's doing and Alicia's doing and Ryan's doing. And so where is it everything being promoted to push this forward? I mean, the things I've said before, Leanne, they've gone on over 20 years, haven't they? And it's been accepted that there has been an issue. And I'm absolutely chuffed to bits that we're now getting a grasp of it. But if all of us can get that information out there, that grasp and that move forward may just be that little bit quicker, that maybe helps that other one child that needs that support. And if we can grab one, we've nailed it.
Just on that point about getting the message out, so we've relatively recently, I think we're on about the 3rd kind of newsletter, we've set up something called the Education and Skills Hub. And actually, although it provides information for schools, it provides information, it's out there. So actually we push out quite regularly now a monthly kind of newsletter. We feature a number of things. And the Education and Skills Hub isn't, I guess to some extent, isn't aligned to my portfolio of services. It's literally aligned to that pathway and the interactions. So there are features on that. It's in its early stages. I know it sounds a bit glib. We've also got a Twitter account that aligns to that. But there's a reality, isn't there? People interact with things like social media, not everybody. We've got a sort of a newsletter. We also do as well a monthly internal briefing. So I'm more than happy to kind of, you know, extend that out as well. So you see that pretty much the things that we kind of talk about in the traction. So I think we've focused on getting things moving and they're heading in the right direction. Now what we're also focusing on is getting the messages out as well. Because I think if not, you're in danger of almost getting the messages out and celebrating before you've really got anything to celebrate or tell. Whereas I think we can talk about action an impact in a way that we couldn't before, whilst recognising we've still got a lot more to do. So more on that, and I'm more than happy to send the link out to that to kind of panel and pick that up. In terms of the START panel is a South Yorkshire Mayor's Combined Authority portal that's been decommissioned. There is a drive towards a replacement to a point for that. So there's something about, we did a session with head teachers and CEOs a month ago to talk them through, actually, there's a new mechanism coming, but an opportunity for people to be part of shaping that rather than prescribed. Nicola Flett, who's the skills manager, she actually brought that, and we started to engage with, so what should this look like? What are the sort of things you want to include in this? So we help kind of build that. So that's what's coming. And rather than me stop there and talk about Jam for later, because that's just a marker, I want to bring Sonia in to talk about what we're doing in the Gap, so how we're promoting through the things that we're doing there. So Education and Skills Hub, portal later, bit more than START, I think, but then we're doing something in the middle to bridge the gap.
Yeah, so a couple of things we do. If we get opportunities in from any employers, or we've presented at Business Doncaster, we also put a round up to the schools about once a fortnight. If we've got any trips, or the NHS get in touch saying we've got open days, so we push those out to try and save the poor career leads wading through hundreds and hundreds of emails. So that's something practical that we do. The other thing that we do in terms of messages for the labour market, working with the PIC team at Doncaster Council, they basically, I'm not very technical, but they chunk up some data from Lightcast. We turn that into something useful for the schools. That goes out, they put it on the website, they put it on parent newsletters, they use it as part of their careers in the curriculum to get accurate labour market messages out, hopefully reaching students and their own staff. So we also do a bit of CPD for staff to kind of do a bit of myth busting as well. So baby steps, but that has been really, really welcomed by the schools, because a lot of the National Careers Service labour market information kind of went. So we have really tried to plug that gap in a way, and I hope we can pick up perhaps where START has kind of left off, because that is really important as well, and it changes. That's why we do it once a month, because obviously things change and jobs ebb and flow. So hopefully that's something that we do. More work to be done though, for sure.
Thank you for that. So the next two questions are from Councillor Bluff. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So on paragraph 36 about the industry-linked trips and visits, what support or links have been created to help the schools organise such trips?
Thank you. As part of the South Yorkshire Careers Hub, we're part of the national campaign called Give an Hour. So we've got about 180 employer volunteers who work with the schools. So again, it sounds a bit basic, but we have a bulletin, we send that to the volunteers, we get schools to fill in their opportunities. So if they've got a mock interview day, we talked a bit about mock interviews a little while ago, or they've got a careers fair. Quite a lot of the schools do World of Work Wednesdays, where they might go on a trip or get visitors in. So the idea is it's a bit like a matchmaking service. The volunteers and the events hopefully marry up. Working with Ryan's team, Alex Dockery's team, anytime they get an employer who thinks they want to do more schoolwork. I had a meeting with Wilmot Dixon last week. They've got some corporate social responsibility, so they're really keen to get into school. So we really try and operate as a bit of an interface between schools and colleges and employers. So that's working really well. Again, it's always something we can improve on. But that's certainly one of the main reasons, that the ways that we do it. We also have, we're part of the Enterprise Advisor Scheme, where you've got an employer that kind of matches with the school. So Polypipe, for example, a match with Sir Thomas Wharton, Hitachi Rail, a match with Hunger Hill. The idea is that they have a bit more of a closer relationship. So again, facilitating those workplace trips, kind of hopefully they've got a bit of a black book of contacts that they can lever more employers into the school and college. So I guess they're two of the main ways that we do it in our small team, and they're very much working with other people within the council.
I can add a bit to that as well, if that's okay. So, obviously, work with Sonia's team. As part of a lot of inward investment, there's a thing called Section 106 where there's a lot of social values that are legally binding that corporations have to do and companies have to do. So we obviously work with them to kind of support with that and try and make them as easy as possible to achieve. So it's very preventative rather than kind of reactive when they're not achieving them. So obviously that works well when we work with Sonia's team and stuff on that.
Thank you. And then moving on to paragraph 43 with the supported internships, it's fantastic news that we've already had 5 graduates complete the course and gain employment with Amazon, and a further 10 due to complete in the next 12 months. What other employers are involved as well as Doncaster Council, please?
Hello, I'll just sort of speak for Stonehill School at this time, if that's okay. We've got some supported internships in the family hubs, which Claire helped set up. We've also got some like with the Saltersgate School, and Vira Electronics is another fabulous firm in Finningley where we've got 1 student there. And then we do have some internal, and Stonehill School has now got the Bistro on the Hill, which is a cafe on site, which we've got a couple of our students in there 2 days a week. Hopefully we may be able to offer apprenticeships in the future for those. So I'd just like to add that from Stonehill's point of view. Thank you.
So for supported internships, we're definitely on a journey in Doncaster, and we are definitely starting to see traction and more improvement. Like I said earlier, there's lots of work with employers to try and break down some of those barriers and make it so that there's a wraparound support for young people. Part of that work and to raise awareness so that young people can access supported internships, and we have the employers. We did Doncaster Futures Fair September this year, which we saw nearly 500 young people with special educational needs attend that event, and that was all around preparing for adulthood and opening up experiences for professionals. There were over 100 professionals there as stall holders, so they can start to talk and potentially offer placements. We do hold monthly employment forums and also employer forums. So the employer forums that we hold, they are run by the skills team, and we showcase everything that's happening from the careers work to the remake learning, all of the things, and it's very much driven by the employers, what they're telling us they want to know more about. So we get there, we've had one today, get their feedback, and then they tell us what they need to learn more about, and we can offer it and offer that supportive environment to these employers. So hopefully then we can create more and more opportunities for our young people.
Hiya, thank you. Yeah, I've got a question about that kind of fits into supported placements and internships. And it's about reasonable adjustments. You've mentioned it a couple of times, and I just wonder, how are they considered and how flexible are they? So if a young person, for example, doesn't know what their reasonable adjustment is, how can an employer respond to that?
Thank you. So that's the beauty of a supported internship. So the young person is on roll at an educational setting full time. However, they must spend the majority of their time in the workplace. And this is facilitated and supported by a tutor and a job coach. So the job coach that is trained and knows the young person can almost be a bit of a conduit and see things, explore things, and work with the employer. It's also a bit of a three-way partnership with the local authority as well. So we'd work with the school, the employer and the local authority to address any barriers and have regular meetings, including the young person as well, so they can discuss their progress. We had a meeting yesterday where a young lady had written a target that she wanted to work on and something that she felt she was good at and something that she wanted more support with. So it's a joint effort, I think is the word I'm looking for.
Top marks, because my next question was going to be, how is the young person's voice and what power does it have and what weight? So you've preempted my question, so this is good, isn't it? Thank you.
You also mentioned remake learning. And remake learning, I think, I mean, I've tried, obviously, I'm getting there, I'm getting engaged. But I do think that remake learning has a massive part to play with children with additional needs, and in the way that you are addressing it in a way that that young person might actually get it instead of it being rammed at them. But my question is, how is that going to work into the curriculum? That's my main concern with remake learning now, is how does that work in with every school?
That's a really, really good kind of question and point. So I would say that what we do at the moment is remake learning days, and we have a remake learning festival. I think that's quite different to implementing remake learning. So actually the work that we've done with Pittsburgh is we've adopted those festivals. In other words, learning can be fun, is fun. Actually, it can signpost you for areas of interest that you didn't know you had. So you pique an interest. And we've already seen that actually families have moved on to learning as well as a consequence to that. Some of the conversations that we're having at the moment, even at regional level, so when we're looking at things like the kind of what's called the school improvement kind of agenda, is kind of saying, actually, how do we embed the principles of remake learning? So in old money, it would have been learning without walls. In other words, you can learn anywhere, pretty much. You can have your formative learning in a classroom, and then actually you can be in a community centre, you can be in a library, you can be in an activity in the park. So I think some of the next steps are around how we take the principles of remake learning and we start to put that into the curriculum. I think the difficulties, and some schools have started to do that, we've got some really good examples. We've got a number of primary schools who've adopted that as their approach when they're looking at sort of, science, technology, manufacturing days. So we've started on arts days. We've seen a little bit of embedding that. I think what we have to watch very closely is the curriculum review, because the curriculum review needs to give us some space to be able to implement that. So I think if some of the regulations are relaxed in the current curriculum, because that's a part of the issue, is all of that formative learning means that that time in school is taken up by must do this, must do that, must have that done, must get this dealt with. And I think sometimes that's why some of the creative subjects have drifted. That's why some of the other things have drifted. So I think it's watching the curriculum review, it's taking some of the kind of the principles. And then when you look at actually a number of our schools, they're kind of living it. So if I was to think about, right, so we had the first foundation health school in Doncaster, so over at Hall Cross. Last week didn't find its way into this report because it was embargoed, so I'll mention it now. But we opened an education centre in Doncaster Royal Infirmary last week. DBTH opened an education centre. That's a partnership between the college and the hospital and the trust. We have young people from across all of our schools engaging in work experience, potentially internships, and then actually getting on a learning pathway for the plethora of jobs in health. So although that doesn't seem to be, that's kind of remake learning. So I think the more we can think about those sort of things, so I think we're starting to see that trickle. To embed it completely, we'll need a bit of a shift change in that curriculum review.
And the thing that I do in my other world, it works. And engaging with the young people, doing something that you can get them into, if you like. And some of the stuff I did well with Delta, just as a trial to see how it were going. And you get young people with autism, and you I think because they're looking at the ability and not disability part of it, and working and understanding, because my family members have additional needs. So I think part of the process there and getting them behind and talking to them, and it is in groups of about 15, which it seems to be an ideal number. But once you've got them, they don't realise that they're learning because you're doing it in a different way. And I think from doing trials that I've done, I'm completely behind it, but thank you.
And I think that just proves that work experience in general is invaluable. I think, Can we move on to a question from Councillor Needham? Thank you.
Hi, thank you. So my question is about T-levels. The government is reviewing T-levels, and we know that the dropout rate is relatively high compared to A-levels, around 30% compared to 10%. Do we have any further information regarding the government review and any reported issues on quality of delivery?
I'll pick that one up. I think generally there is a review of level 3 qualifications. So I meet with the DfE fairly regularly now. I met with them earlier this week and asked whether there was any movement in terms of that review, being led by Skills England. At the moment, we've got no indication of what's coming out. What I can tell you, and I don't have the exact numbers, I'm happy to share them afterwards, and I'll dig them out. But actually, we don't have the same dropout rate of T-levels in Doncaster as nationally. And I think that's because fundamentally, the college do T-levels, our UTC do T-levels, and Outward are doing some kind of T-levels. So we've kept the numbers at a manageable amount and how we've kind of progressed that. And what we can also see, and you'll see from the report that follows, is actually the traction, the outcomes for those T-levels are kind of improving. And I think it comes down to that conversation and that selection at the beginning, because T-levels are quite intensive in terms of what's required in that, in that school day, the links with employers, out and about into businesses and so on. So we don't see a 30% dropout rate. I think we probably see, as you do with all learning and all qualifications kind of post-16, in that initial 6 weeks, you see a bit of a drop-off. And it's not necessarily a drop-off, it's a change into, actually I want to go into apprenticeships, or actually I probably want to do applied general now, or I might I've changed my mind, I want to do A-levels. So we haven't got that level of drop-off. I would say that we are probably, when I look at the numbers, we are probably less than 10%, I think, in terms of dropout rate on T-levels. As soon as I know what's happening with level 3, then I'm more than happy to update panel.
Thank you, Leanne. That's great news. Thank you.
Councillor Cox, next question.
Sorry, not illuminated. Paragraph 54, employer-led skills challenges. Can we have a bit more information on these and how successful these have been in supporting awareness and aspiration rising? Has this helped with employability applications to vacancies? May just be me, I don't think so.
So I think the thing that we've picked up on, and we've done quite a lot of work with kind of businesses around engagement, when we've looked at actually where's the gap that sits between education and employers. And I think sometimes it's that understanding. And so one of the things that we did as a consequence to that is that's why we've developed the skills profile. Because actually what employers are telling us is it's about interpersonal skills, it's about creativity, it's about confidence, it's about all of those things, and how can young people better demonstrate that. So I think there's a willingness from the business sector to engage. I think there's a willingness from the education sector to engage, but actually there's a gap in the middle around kind of common language and connectivity. For us, the coming together on that was to develop a skills profile where businesses and educators come together and we go, what does this look like for people in Doncaster, so not just children, and how can they demonstrate those skills? Because the thing we know in Doncaster, and it's fantastic, we have the access that people in Doncaster have to the breadth in the economy in Doncaster is incredible, actually. There are opportunities, aren't there? So I think it's that gap of common language, gap of understanding, some of those informal skills. That's what we're looking to bridge. And if we're being honest, I know we've talked about this before, I suppose the other challenge is the fact that actually it's really hard for people to cross the place to engage in some of those vacancies and opportunities. So Doncaster is actually quite a large, well, it's the largest in terms of area met in the country. But actually sometimes a place that's only a few miles down the road is almost impossible to get to because of the public transport network. So I think that's the other challenge, I think, for both employers and residents in equal measure. So we're trying to bridge the skills one. We are having ongoing conversations, I think, around kind of transport. I have no idea how that's kind of resolved, but it's got to be a conversation that's had at some point. But I think we're having the conversations, and that's really important because there is a disconnect. Businesses, of course, want people with very specific skills, and rightly so, in order to do things. But the question is, knowledge you can teach, it's the skills that actually you want people to develop to take advantage of those opportunities. And sometimes you can turn up at an interview and not be able to demonstrate that in the best possible way. So there's something about flipping that says, how do you, we've talked about it in the SEND thing, so I think it flips in terms of business as well. Often people talk about, how do we ensure that children are school ready? No. How do we ensure that schools are ready for children? I think it's the same thing for businesses. Not how do we ensure that people are business ready. It's actually how do we ensure that businesses are ready to receive people so they're able to articulate their skills in the best possible way to take advantage of the opportunities. I'll get off my soapbox now, Councillor Cox.
Yeah, we've been working with businesses quite recently in looking at their recruitment processes and how they recruit people, and how they look at employing people. So trying to move away from your traditional here's a CV, here's an application form, because some of them can be a very big barrier to some of the participants that are on our programs. So we're working with businesses to look at alternative ways in which they can participate in an interview or conduct their interviews, such as through video or through a skills kind of test way of doing stuff. So they can people, when they're actually doing the job interview, can actually show their skills rather than just talk about them, which we think has got a lot more value to it. And the consensus so far is businesses have been really open to that because it stops their barrier for recruiting people as well, or recruiting people that don't fit and then don't finish their probation period or stuff like that. So it's a two-way sort of thing, like Leanne said. So
do you think sometimes that the young person's expectations are a bit high? Because it was something that I'd come across in not this life but another life, but where their expectations just weren't achievable, both in financial and what hours they want. Everything that I were getting from them is what they wanted, not what I wanted from them. So everything was led towards the young person. But when reality kicks in and when a real day's work starts, they don't like it and they will go. But do you think that's explained to the young person?
I think that links really well, doesn't it, with the rest of the conversation we've been having, I think, at panel about kind of experience, work experience, real experience of being in kind of businesses. And it's the point, I think, that both panel and colleagues have made here about you can do a 2-week work experience and that's one thing, or actually you can have regular interactions into a business, understand how a business works, know what you are getting into, know what it sort of looks like. Because actually, we want young people to have high expectations, don't we, and aspirations. But we also want young people to be, to have clarity on what it looks like. And that actually, whilst you may want to be here, you probably have to start kind of and build up that kind of pathway. And I think it's probably more that they haven't got line of sight of that. You can't imagine, can you, what's there if you kind of can't see it. So I think there's something about how we enable that. So I would always want young people to have high expectations and aspirations. But I think that it is that, how do we give them line of sight so that they can go, so to get there, what I actually need to do is this, this, this and this. And I know that because I've been into a business and I've seen that in action.
I also
that-
think it's...
Oh, sorry.
I also think it's to do with quality careers advice and guidance, not at one point, at one level, at multiple levels throughout their learning journey and also as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. It kind of links to my next question, and it's about promoting careers that we know we're lacking in Doncaster, like we've discussed before, for an example, speech and language therapists. I think it's really positive having that education centre in the hospital, and that is giving those young people that really on the ground experience, and they might have thought for a few years they want to do something that they've had an experience of, and then think, well, actually, I'd rather do that, and in a career path might change. So I just wondered, how much are we promoting to fill those gaps where we're in need?
I think some of it, a tiny bit, is through the LMI stuff that we do. So students, parents, teachers are a bit more aware of actually what vacancies are out there. So rather than maybe what they think they are. Just another example, it comes back to the NHS. Actually, we're working with someone who is looking for a volunteer school where there's perhaps a care home nearby and a healthcare centre. So they want to try and model a little bit of work experience, getting GPs on board. So we're currently thinking of suggesting it possibly to Ash Hill. So that might be quite an interesting thing to try. They've done something similar in Sheffield. And again, it's just trying different sorts of techniques, because obviously they're always saying some jobs in the NHS. Dietetics, I think, is another one that we're really, really short of. So I think we would always try and promote all sorts of careers. One of the things the Careers Hub do once a week, I know it's on LinkedIn, and I know not all schools are on LinkedIn, they promote like a career of the week, and they pick all sorts of weird and wonderful things to sort of try and broaden people's horizons. There's also National Careers Week in March, which again, 1 week of the year, but that's really promotes, we try and get schools to do a different sector every day, maybe different role models, get people in that really challenge people's perceptions of gender, as well as kind of what they think a job might be or how many there might be. And yes, the first thing they ask about is money all the time, but then you have to talk to them about all the other things. So there are quite a lot of things, and again, there's always more things we can do. We're always encouraging schools to work with each other. Have you got any suggestions? Share them with your fellow academies. So yeah, I would say we do quite a lot, but again, always we could do more.
Thank you. Next question is from Councillor Anderson, question 15.
Paragraph 85. This recognises the barriers to work experience for young people. A one-stop portal that puts schooling employee required information, including risk assessment, placement opportunities and other information in one place, would really help to reduce logistical issues, both from employer and school perspective. Is this the way it's expected to work?
Is there a one-stop shop for work experience? No. And actually, I think if we reflect back on sort of years gone by, and there probably was, but it was put a few answers in and out comes an answer with a whole range of things that you may or may not be right for. Back in I'm reflecting on my own kind of work experience. Can't remember what the programme was called, but that's pretty much what it did. I answered about 50 questions, and then it told me everything I wanted to do. And it was bizarre in some ways. I'd have either been a computer programmer or an archivist, I think, were the things that came out in my case. But there isn't that facility anymore. I think what we are hoping to do, though, with the work with the South Yorkshire Mayor's Combined Authority and the sort of I don't want to use the word portal because it always sounds a bit kind of weird. It makes it sound like a static software package. But this idea of a repository, if you like, is what I'll call it, that we're looking to shape that can inform kind of work experience, build it up from the bottom. I think that's the closest that we'll get as a region. And therefore that can be informed by some of that. But is there going to be a single platform that covers everything? No. I think we have an opportunity as a place to shape the regional offer into something that will deliver the things that we need it to. Maybe that's one, when that's a little bit further on, Councillor Anderson, when that portal or that repository has got a little bit more developed, maybe that's something we bring back. So actually you've got a better idea of what that kind of looks like, because I think the benefit is it moves us away from, not away from, that's quite wrong. It adds to the principles of work experience into employer-led project work as well. So some of the things we've talked about up today of, you know, the 2-week work experience programme, the what is it you want to do when you leave school, all of those things. And then the things we've talked about a day here, a day there, really getting to understand things, that's where that's going. So I think it'd be useful to bring that back when we've got something a bit more concrete. But the answer is there a single solution? No. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
For clarification, I have some concerns regarding remote. Yeah, I have quite a few concerns regarding remote work and learning. Do we find it's working in any remote working or learning? Because I mean, some of the things that we saw, and I can comment on what we're going off in COVID for learning and what have you, that it didn't seem to work. And I know you've mentioned about some employers that potentially could do a video link for a go on, what getting into work thing. But do you think it's really going to work? Because I mean, one of my sons really didn't do well with remote learning, and then they had to have the camera on, but then didn't feel comfortable with the camera on, but they couldn't. They were given an absent mark because the camera wasn't on. And you know, is it? I know my esteemed colleague over there will always say there isn't a one size fits all. So is that an opportunity that's going to give to all different people? Because I mean, I'm not a big supporter of virtual stuff, but did it make sense then? No?
Yes.
No, thank you.
Yeah. One thing I would say, I did some student consultation out at New College a couple of weeks ago, and asked them a lot of questions about what school provision they'd had, what they would have liked more of. Really fascinating, great young people. And I asked them about virtual sort of experiences of work, and their feedback was really interesting. And I think this is something that I would say, if it can be as well as amazing, because you could talk to an employer halfway around the world, you know, that you would never ever be able to link up with face to face. So I guess my answer would be, isn't it amazing that you could talk to someone in Seattle or Pittsburgh and I suppose the other thing is we have to mirror what's happening in the labour market. You know, a lot of young workers now, they do have to get used to working remotely. And so that kind of hybrid working, I think we've got to try and foster that a little bit as well. I would always say face-to-face experiences, definitely the best. But they were talking about, there's an organisation you probably heard of called Speakers for Schools. They do spotlight talks, they do sector, they do virtual experiences. They do quite a lot of, they've got a great send offer. And they were like, yeah, it's great, as long as it's on top of other things. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I share your reservations about online learning and having to do a lot of delivery in COVID myself as a careers advisor. That was hard for me, hard for them. So I wouldn't want to see it as a replacement, but if it can be an additional, I think it's definitely got a place.
I think what I've seen from working is all the jobs that I've had up until recently have been manual as a joiner and what have you. But I think when we look at things now, when we're talking about job interviews and what have you, one of the things that I found, when you employ a young person, that young person, if it's cold, they won't turn up for work. Working virtually, if it's chucking it down, oh, please, can I do it online? No, because when your work starts, it might be raining and you've got to go out. It seems to me we're taking a lot of reality out of these young people's worlds in making it virtual and making it into a place where, no, you don't have to do that if you don't want. But sometimes we don't have a choice.
Can I just come in there and say that I think even if you're working remotely, you're still working. I know what you're saying, there are certain jobs where you must be there and it is a physical job. But I just wanted to point out as well, we had a discussion in the planning meeting before this meeting of what it actually meant in the report about the hybrid side of it. And it's interesting that I think, because a lot of people, for an example, the council, some days they're at home, some days they're in the civic building. So it almost limits an opportunity to have a young person doing some work experience because, you know, like we joked with Caroline, she was working from home that day and we said if somebody was shadowing her, would, you know, can you imagine that sort of risk assessment, taking a young person home with you to work at home that day, you know. So, yeah, I know what you're saying, Steve, but it's interesting, isn't it, how for some young people it could really work for them, especially if they've got a lot of anxiety. Yeah, but I get that some areas it really would not work for. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment further or, yeah.
Just very quickly, I was going to say it's not about either or, is it? I think that in some instances it will work. So actually, in some instances in the council, some people can work from home on certain days, and in other jobs they can't because of the nature of the job. So I think it's where it will benefit. I think where the work experience bits benefit is the points that Sonia was making about being able to interact with people you would never get to come into contact with at all. You know, so big executives of big global organisations, or actually even seeing a particular skill that exists, I don't know, 90 mile away or whatever. So those sorts of learning experiences, because if we were to think about young people and in particular some young people, we're saying it would aid with that transition. So actually you gain familiarity about what you are then going into. So I think there are some huge benefits in that sense, but it's a mixed economy model. You would never say actually it's all or it's nothing. I think it's just being able to use that as part of the learning experience. You know, I agree, face-to-face is best, but it'll work in some cases.
I think I had a couple of apprentices that worked for me, and the use of digital were massively frustrating because you could be putting a roof on a building. They turn up with a camera and say, "Can you take a picture of me to show I can put a roof on?" I'd say no, because taking a picture of you, can you put a roof on? No, I can't. So why do you want me to do that? So it's that bit of using technology to a part where it's kind of took over, and it's not showing the hands-on thing that people can do. But it's just a frustration I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we've asked our questions now, so if we just look at recommendations, and actually I'd like to make a recommendation that hopefully the panel support in saying that we know that most educational settings are engaging in some form of work experience, but I'd like to sort of recommend that be all educational settings. I know we have some that have students with complex needs, but again, adapt what that means for them, but still have some form of work experience. I think what we've spoke about today. I think it proves that it is invaluable for all young people. I'd also just like to, say that the Children and Young People's Overview and Scrutiny Panel to note the content of this report and make any recommendations accordingly, which I've just made one. And does the panel feel that it has reviewed the contents of the report and note the work completed? Yeah. Okay, so that side of the meeting is closed. So I just would like to say, if anybody does want to leave, obviously you can leave now, or you're quite welcome to stay for the next part, which is education, achievement, outcomes. So I'll hand over to Leanne, if that's okay.
I'll let my colleagues who are supporting the work experience element, they can go if that's okay.
So we'll do the second part then. I'll pass over to Leanne Hornsby. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just by way of a quick overview, obviously the details are in the report, and you'll see that there's either a sustained position or a generally improved position in Doncaster. I think, and there's still work for us to do in Doncaster. What I would say is that, and I reflect on this quite a little bit, and I know that the assessments are kind of changing in terms of Ofsted and so on. We're moving away from single graded inspections, but it's thematic graded inspections. But actually, when I reflect back to where we were in 2020, so 66% of our schools were good or better, and we're now 92% of our schools are good or better. So actually, if your child goes to a school in Doncaster, then they broadly go to a good school. So I think I just wanted to make that point because I think it's really important. And when you look at the outcomes, now our focus very clearly is on, despite the improvement, is actually on and in support of our young people who are either in receipt of an EHCP, who are on a SEND support plan. So because generally you can see that kind of drive. Generally, we can see that children where English is an additional language are achieving and exceeding outcomes for their peers. Actually, outcomes for children looked after, albeit that changes over time depending on cohorts, are actually doing quite well. Children with an EHCP, broadly, are doing better than they were a few years ago. We still have work we want to do, but actually the travel is in the right direction. I think the most difficult cohort, and I don't mean they are difficult, I mean for us really in terms of our journey, are actually those young people who are in receipt of a SEND support plan. Because actually I think they're the outcomes that we need to kind of significantly improve. The journey's there, you can see the traction, but we've a lot of work to do. So I just wanted to do that as a bit of an opener and then into your questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So the first question's from Councillor Needham.
Thank you, Chair. And it kind of links into that kind of a bit, which is a nice segue, isn't it? So on the whole, just behind national average on reading, writing and maths, what steps are we taking to improve? So it's a bit more specific, I think, really.
Hello, thank you for that. Well, yes, on the back of Leanne's opening, it is an improvement journey. So in terms of taking steps to improve, whilst that's important and necessary in terms of our aspiration of where we want to be, I just want to take the opportunity to just flag the improvement that has been secured since over last year. And I think it's because it is part of where we're going next, but let's acknowledge what we've achieved as well. So in terms of improvement in 2024 over 2023, the gap to national has closed significantly across all areas. And in terms of reading, writing, maths and combined RWM, the gap to nationals closed in all areas. And that in itself indicates that Doncaster is improving above national. In terms of specifically what those gaps that are closing are at, read, write, maths combined has closed by 2.2 percentage points over last year. Writing's closed by 2 percentage points over last year, and maths has closed by 1.3 percentage points. In terms of reading, we have seen an improvement for Doncaster over last year, but national has also improved at a higher rate, marginally. So in terms of reading, the gap to national has slightly increased, it's slightly widened by 0.4%. So just wanted to contextualise the fact that there has been improvement, although we are aspiring for further improvement. And in terms of what we're doing in that space, sorry, I've just skipped on notes there, I do apologise. In terms of what we're doing in that space, the priorities we've outlined, we have a reading, writing, maths strategy, and that's been in place for about 3 years. And we've recently refreshed that. So it's been refreshed for 24-25 out to 2029. And the reading, writing, maths strategy has it's been presented at Schools Forum, and it's been focused predominantly on promoting oracy as the golden thread throughout reading, writing, maths in terms of learning. And the reason for that is there's a lot of compelling evidence around oracy as being fundamental to supporting that improvement in learning, not only in reading, writing, maths, but across all the curriculum areas. But in terms of our strategy, we've got to focus on oracy. There are a number of priorities within the strategy, as I say, about oracy, around targeting groups, around strategic partnerships, around and harnessing those strategic partnerships for acceleration of improvement, and also around, as I've said, targeting specific groups, greater refinement around diagnostics, greater refinement around sort of planning and sequencing curriculum for young people in those vulnerable groups who might have smaller steps in learning. So there's a refreshed strategy in terms of what we're doing about it. The strategy's been refreshed. It's already secured traction, but we've refined it further, and we expect to see the fruits of that coming through in future outcome measures from 2025 beyond.
Thank you, Jane. Just for the benefit of our YouTube viewers, could you just explain what oracy is, please?
So oracy, in terms of the fluency, if you like, in terms of being able to read, comprehend, articulate, debate, engage in that cognitive using that cognitive understanding to articulate a point of view, and obviously oracy in terms of listening skills, in terms of critical skills overall, within social interaction, but also in terms of translating content into fluently into your own articulation. I hope that helps.
That's great, thank you. Sorry for putting you on the spot on that one.
It's okay.
So just in terms of further improvements then, are there any, and I don't like to say the word easy, but are there anything identified that can be changed quickly to make a bit of a difference? Thank you.
I'm going to give a really practical example, I think. A really practical example of something we've done. So we've worked with, so I talked before about the skills profile. It might seem an odd connection, but actually what we've done is we've tested that with a primary school, a secondary school and the college. The example I want to give here is the work we've done with the primary school. So what this primary school have done is they've embedded the critical thinking, the problem solving into their assessment processes. So we have something called the multiplication tables outcomes, which, by the way, again, it preceded this, so I'll send it on to you. Doncaster's done quite well in that. The school that was involved in this exercise, they have seen a 58% improvement in numeracy and maths at Key Stage 2, and that's really clear in the multiplication tables. Now, that's one school because they were the pilot, but already talking to that school about saying, actually, and working with Rethinking Assessment, so Rosie Clayton, a couple of other national people, and saying, how do we scale that out? Because when you look at that, that means that over half a class improved significantly at Key Stage 2 that wouldn't have done that without that additional work. And that was, of course it was to do with the kind of the numeracy and the skills and the rest of it, but actually it was about getting children to think differently when they're presented with the question, to think differently about the problem, and again building their confidence. So that's a practical example of the sorts of things that we're doing and embedding and linking into that wider thing. So I just thought it was useful to mention that.
Thank you, that's a great story, thank you.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask about the homeschool children, because we've got quite a few in Doncaster. I think it is also international. But, you know, how do we measure outcomes of those children being homeschooled? And, you know, I know it comes with the difficulties, but if we don't and we can't do that at the moment, are there any plans in the future to be able to measure those, please?
We don't. It's really hard to do that. I think it was, you know, we talked in a previous scrutiny, didn't we, about, and we had the EHE report. Whilst we have a voluntary register and we have some voluntary engagement with a number of those kind of parents, the difficulty is we don't know where that education takes place. If it's in a Doncaster school, so if it relates to a Doncaster school, whether it's tutoring or otherwise, it's really hard under the current regulatory framework for us to be able to do that, Chair. I think if you were to ask me, would I want to do that? Absolutely, because we should be able to look at the outcomes for all of our young people, because then you can actually measure the quality of the education that those young people are receiving. But actually, we find ourselves in a very difficult position, because actually, although we can have informal conversations, and I'm sure if I had that conversation with the team who oversee that, they'll say, oh yes, actually, child so-and-so, then they did this or they did that. But holistically, we wouldn't currently be able to measure the outcomes of those young people at all, which is 800 plus young children in reality.
It's a big number. Yeah, I get what you're saying about that. Thank you. So we'll move on to Councillor Bluff's question.
Thanks. For the early years and foundation stage, is there a reason why the special educational needs support pupils have achieved below national at a good level of development, in contrast with all other groups where a good level of development is generally in line with the national?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So outcomes overall are consistently in line with the national average over time for early years foundation stage. In Doncaster, good levels of development at 68%, again in line with national, and this is an increasing trend. It's an improvement of 1 percentage point from last year, for example. In terms of good levels of development within SEND support, there has been a slight dip in the percentages for 2024, but I do want to highlight that the report has included some roundings. So in terms of 2023, the report rounded the outcomes for good level of development with SEND support to 19. In fact, it was 18.7% in 2023, but it was reported as 19% because it was rounded up. In 2024, the actual percentage for good levels of development was 18.5%, and that's been rounded down to 18. So that's why it looks as though there's been a dip and a gap of 1%, but in reality, it's a dip of 0.2%, the difference between the 18.7 in 23 and the 18.5 in 2024. So it's still a dip, but it's not the whole percentage point that is in the report. So apologies for that. We could go to 1 decimal point in future reporting, perhaps. In terms of, so that for that clarification. And I think I just want to highlight as well that the number in the cohort of SEND support in the early years foundation stage has increased again over last couple of years. So in 2022, the cohort number was 319. And of the percentage that achieved good levels of development then, that was 16.6%. So that was 53 children in 2022 with a cohort of 319. In 2024, the cohort was 356, and the number achieving number of children out of that 18.5% was 66 children, and that was an increase over 2023, where it was 65 children at 18.7%. And even in 2023, there was a significant increase of about 12 children from 2022, from the previous year. So it is increasing in terms of pupil number. It is increasing apart from that slight dip of the 0.2% in 2024, but the cohort has been bigger in 2024 as well. So I just wanted to clarify those statistics.
Thank you for that. So now go to Councillor Anderson.
Expected standards in reading, writing and maths was only 5% for EHCP pupils. Whilst numbers are low, which can skew results, are there particular reasons for it being a lot lower than national average? And is it just reading? And why is this?
I'll go again. Okay, thank you. So again, just in terms of cohort size, and thank you for referencing, in terms of young people with an EHCP, small numbers, or relatively small numbers, I should say, in each cohort can skew what the percentages can look like from a year-on-year perspective. So in 2024, the number of children in the cohort with EHCP was 157. So within this cohort of 157, 8 pupils reached the expected standard of read, write, maths within that percentage that's being quoted. So it was 8 pupils out of the 157 in the cohort. Had 14 children achieved a good level of development, then we would have been at the national average. So that just sort of shows when we're talking relative in terms of numbers. In terms of absolute terms, the writing had the lowest pass rate, but that's also the case nationally. The gap between Doncaster and national is widest in reading, and that goes back to the earlier conversation about reading, writing, maths, and reading being the gap there. In terms of fluctuations, as I've mentioned, the trend can fluctuate because of the cohort numbers. And to fully understand, we need to look at each individual pupil, really, in terms of discretely looking at what their individual needs are. In terms of other factors that might impact, we know that there can be a link between EHCP, young people with an EHCP and their attendance. Nationally, there's a strong link in that space. So again, I think diagnostically about understanding why there's been it's not been as good as we've wanted to in terms of EHCP achievement. I think we need to look at each individual contextually in terms of their own progress and achievement. That said, the Read, Write, Maths strategy that we mentioned earlier and the refresh strategy and the priorities within it will seek to diagnose and address at that more granular level, particularly, as I said earlier, around the targeting specific cohorts, understanding in terms of their individual needs, diagnosing those needs, and working with teachers, working with schools in terms of their bespoke, if you like, offer, their bespoke curriculum, particularly about how to adapt the curriculum and working in concert with our SEND specialists to ensure that there is a really personalised approach for those young people. So that in itself, I do believe, will be more prominent in the Read, Write, Maths strategy and the work that the colleagues are doing with schools in that space, but looking at our EHCP cohort discreetly.
Sorry, thank you But just what you've said there with working with a more personalised way of educating a young person with additional needs. How does that work with actual teachers on site or what they call teaching assistants and people that, because we know they're not there, and you know, if you've got a young kid, I mean, like Caroline works with them, then that young person is going to need one-to-one to get them through, and that's the staff aren't there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the Read Write Maths team, it's not an isolated strategy, and also the colleagues who are working in schools with teachers in that respect. It's really important. So in addition, there is the SEND strategy, and there's all the work that is happening, and the CPD, the development work, the interventions, the reviews, if you like, that are taking place in terms of inclusion enhancement reviews. So we have a number of different, in terms of school improvement, we're a team of teams. So there's the Read Write Maths team, there's the School Improvement Advisors for SEND and Inclusion, and they engage, and then there's also our Learning Standards and Effectiveness Officers. And they engage well with the SENCOs in schools in terms of their development, SENCO networks, in terms of CPD. There's also leadership development in terms of the School Improvement Leadership Development Programme that we have in terms of head teachers. And there's also discrete work with regards to subject leaders in schools through the Read Write Maths team. So all of that working in concert is actually about informing strategic priority development areas. They are articulated through recommendations and action plans following visits into schools, diagnostics and recommendations. And those are then followed up in terms of working with, going back after a term, going back into another term, in terms of planned programmes of development. But it's not only about intervention work, it's very much about developing that distributed capacity and networked learning opportunities for schools to complete peer reviews, etc. So there's a number of mutually reinforcing approaches that I believe helps drive improvement in our schools and develops the capacity in our schools for leadership development within schools directly. Yeah.
Thank you. Lot of words there. Half of them I didn't understand because I'm thick. But no, sorry. It's the actual people, the teaching assistants that are there with these young people, and I'm not going to name names, but I am related to one, but he hasn't been offered any training in lots of different things within. So yeah, I mean, we know that the policy's there, we know everything's there, but what's actually happening on the shop floor? And it's that causes me concern. We see high turnover in teaching assistants. We see them come and go and come and go, and we can talk and talk and talk about it. That they've got this ability to train, to move on, but when you get to the shop floor, it's not there, and it's massively upsetting, especially when you see the teaching assistant build the bonds with the pupil, so then it aids everybody teaching because the bonds are built, the trust is built to say, right, come on, whoever you are, sit down, let's get on with this, instead of, who are you? I've not seen you before. So that, we seem to be missing a trick. But, I mean, I get the hierarchy of it, absolutely bang on. But it's the shop floor that is failing everything that's above it.
Yeah, I think that's that's a really important point. So, we have already, through establishing our SEND and Inclusion Quality Assurance Panel, actually worked with on a cohort basis where actually we've invested high needs block funding. In some schools, we've got some great examples of where you can actually see that happening on a cohort basis. We've funded TAs, we've funded specialist teachers for a period of up to 3 years in some cases. We're moving into the locality panel funding, so that's where, you know, people come together from a particular place, leaders in a place, and then agree where the funding should go to and how that should support young people. So that's one thing. We're doing that. It doesn't account for the fact that we've got a recruitment and retention issue, which I think is the point that you're highlighting as well. So actually, we can, and we've offered this in some schools' cases, actually we can, through the high needs block, fund some of that resource, but whether or not they can recruit to that is a different matter as well. And whether or not in some cases that finds its way to the front line as well is the other kind of issue. So a little bit of what we've started to think about working with the Senko Forum is actually forget about all the constraints at the moment, forget about all the regulations, what would it look like in the future? And that's the work that Martin Owen is leading on around the SEND transformation. So how do we shape that? That's not a quick fix, I wish it was, but actually it's a fix that we can begin to think about in the future, because if we don't think about that, then we'll get what we've always got, I think. So we've, I think, improved things at one level where actually children with the most need are getting the support they need. We're expanding places across Doncaster to enable young people to go into places in Doncaster. I think what's really interesting about this cohort, and people often talk, don't they, about this is the Key Stage 4 cohort that were the most, you know, in previous years, this is the Key Stage 4 cohort that were most affected by COVID. This is the Key Stage 2 cohort that in reality who were most affected by COVID, because they are now coming through, having gone through early years with speech, language, communication delays. I think there's also something in there around, and I think one of the things that we are embarking on, I don't think it's a short thing, is to do a deep dive into where Jane talks about individual child level, actually distilling what are the needs of the children, where are the key themes, and how can we target resources against that? Because I think if we were able to do that deep dive, we could bring something quite detailed back without talking about individual children, but saying actually the needs in Doncaster, we already know, speech, language, communication, but actually what are the other needs and how do we support that in a slightly different way? I think that would give you much more detail, because we can attempt in numbers to compare last year to this year, but the need will be very different last year to this year. Whereas actually, if we were able to do the deep dive and say, right, this year, the main needs are this is why children are on a SEND support plan. We know holistically why there's, but really, why are they? This is why children have an EHCP and these are the needs. Right, this is where we need to go and this is the solution we need. I think that's kind of the space we need to get into. Doesn't answer your question, but it identifies the piece of work I think that we need to do.
Thank you for that. I've got a bit of a generalised question, really. Is child poverty in some of our most deprived areas having an impact on educational outcomes, do you feel, and possibly future career prospects? I'm just wondering what your take on that would be.
There's a reason I've got a bit of a smile on my face here, Councillor Hemshaw, because I can tell you that the schools in the most deprived areas in Doncaster have the very best outcomes. So when we look at, and I'll circulate the link, the Northern Powerhouse have done a report. At the moment it's on secondary schools, but the principles are the same. They've done a report and said, actually, if we take the Progress 8 measure and we put in deprivation, 8 of our secondary schools would be in the upper quartile schools for the country. So, and when we were looking at outcomes as they were coming in the summer, and arguably at Key Stage 2 as well, what we can really see is the schools in our more deprived, I know areas don't see themselves as deprived. Do you know that bit about basically the areas that essentially aren't as affluent as other areas? I'll kind of go there. I know that's probably not completely correct, but there's a reality there, isn't there? Those schools, in terms of their rate of improvement, their improvement is significant. So I think those schools, because of the nature and the experiences of young people and the access that young people have, are having to work differently and in a slightly different way. So I think the outcomes are better, and I'll send you the link to the Northern Powerhouse report. It's really interesting.
Thank you. we go to question, I think it's the last one actually, from Councillor Needham.
And you'd be pleased to know you can either answer it yes or no, or you can tell us all about it. So the question is, are there any broad indications around Key Stage 4 GCSE results for this year?
Yes. Sorry, I couldn't resist, Councillor Needham. Oh yes, so I mean, notwithstanding what Leanna's just said about the Northern Powerhouse report and our schools in some of with more deprived communities, Key Stage 4 results were broadly consolidated in terms of the improvements that we made last year. So little change overall in attainment 8, slightly below national, but progress 8, which is a really key measure, is in line with national average. And the importance of what Leanna's just said about the Northern Powerhouse report about that progress 8 measure. Yes, we're in line with national average, but when that's overlaid with deprivation indicators, actually upper quartile is a place for a large number of our secondary schools. In terms of pupils, number of pupils passing English and maths at grade 4 and above, that's an improved area. And now Doncaster's only 1 percentage point below national, so that's another positive. I think Leanne's already referenced about, and you'll have seen in the report anyhow, about pupils with English as an additional language. Their achievement is positive and they're making extremely good progress as well. But because their progress has been from a lower starting point, their attainment overall remains below average, but the progress is really important and positive. And again, disadvantaged pupils are achieving really well against all indicators. So it's a nice point to end on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it's for us to recommend and note as a panel, Children and Young People's Overview and Scrutiny Panel, that all data included in this report and the achievement outcomes of all key stages for children and young people in Doncaster, such as good outcomes for early years foundation stage and the outcomes for particular groups of young people, such as looked after children and children with special educational needs and disabilities. Does the panel feel it has reviewed the contents of the report and note the work completed?
Agreed.
Thank you. And thank you for everybody's attendance today. I think it's been a really, really good meeting. And I just want to pass over to Caroline, our governance officer, to discuss the work plan. Thank you.
Hi, as always, I won't be too long. Basically, got one more meeting in March next year that'll look at domestic abuse, and it'll have an invite to the Youth Council to reflect on their work undertaken. In terms of the forward plan, there's nothing specifically for this panel, but for OSMC, they'll have the next Q2 update. It's tomorrow, actually. So it's not too late if anyone has any questions, if they're not on the committee, to put through the chair. Also, next year will be budget and corporate plan, so they're the main areas that are on the forward plan at the moment, and there was an opportunity to feed into them. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I will close the meeting. Thank you very much.